Hi, everybody, and welcome to the third week of Research Methods and Design. This week, we'll cover chapters 5 and 6 of the textbook. So far, we have learned about research and how to start designing a research project. We also learned about theory, hypothesis, variables, forms of reasoning, as well as ethical issues in research. This week, we'll talk about how do we measure concepts in general, how to measure and operationalize crime, and where to get data. Since measuring abstract concepts can be challenging and often imprecise, researchers must describe how they measure these concepts. It's important to move from broad, unclear ideas to something that can be observed and measured in the real world. Without this clarity, it's difficult to effectively communicate the importance of our research to others. Concepts are essentially labels we create to help us make sense of the world. They represent mental images that group together similar observations and experiences. These concepts don't physically exist in the real world, so we can't measure them directly. To accurately measure them, we first need to define and clarify these abstract ideas. Researchers measure three main types of things. One, direct observables, which are things we can easily see and measure. Two, indirect observables, which require more complex observation and interpretation. And three, constructs, which are theoretical ideas that can't be observed directly or indirectly. The textbook provides a more detailed discussion of these ideas, including indicators, dimensions, reification, and the conceptual order. Operationalization defines concepts by describing how they will be measured. Completion of this statement, I measured it by, constitutes the operationalization of the concept. Measurement involves assigning scores, numbers, or other labels to the observations. This is one of the most important and difficult phases of criminal justice research. For example, you know how to operationalize the concept of intelligence by assigning scores in an intelligence test. The higher the score, the more intelligent a person is. This process quantified or assigned numerical values to the intelligence concept and converted it from an abstract verbal entity to a measurable quantity or a variable. Every variable should have two important qualities. Attributes composing a variable must be exhaustive and mutually exclusive. For a variable attribute to be exhaustive, it means that the variable includes all possible categories or values that a respondent might fall into. For a variable's attribute to be mutually exclusive means that each observation or data point can belong to only one category or attribute of that variable. In other words, no single data point can simultaneously belong to more than one attribute of the variable. Consider the variable type of property crime in a criminal justice context. The attributes of this variable might be theft, burglary, and robbery. For the attributes to be mutually exclusive, each property crime incident is classified under only one attribute. For instance, if an individual breaks into a home and steals items, it will be classified as burglary and not as theft or robbery. If the theft involves the use of force, it is categorized as robbery, ensuring no overlap with the other categories. For the attributes to be exhaustive, they must cover all possible categories. These three categories encompass all common forms of property crime. Every incident involving property crime can be placed into one of these categories, making the attributes exhaustive. The level of measurements are nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Ratio measures are the highest level, followed by interval, ordinal, and nominal. Higher levels of measurements specify categories that have ranked order or more complex numerical properties. You cannot convert a lower level of measurement to a higher one. Watch my YouTube video either by clicking the link above here or on Brightspace to learn more about levels of measurements of variables. In the last lecture, we talked about the validity of causal inference. Here we'll talk about the validity of measurement. Validity is defined as the ability of an instrument to measure what the researcher intends to measure. Say you want to identify the political party one is a member of. If you're going to ask whether the person is liberal or conservative, this is not going to measure what you intend to measure, even if, on the whole, liberals tend to be associated more with the Democratic Party and conservatives more with the Republican Party. You need to ask and obtain the exact measure you intended to research, which is the political party. Another example of an incorrect measurement would be if I scored your overall final grade using the number of clicks each of you have on Brightspace. The measurement would give an A to people who have the most clicks on Brightspace, but that would not be a valid measure of your knowledge in this course because the number of clicks does not always translate into retaining the most knowledge. There are several different types of validity in social science measurement. Each type of validity has different meaning, uses, and limitations, and take a different approach to assessing the extent to which it actually measures what is intended. One is face validity, which is the basic type, viewed as measuring what it purports to measure. It is based on the individual or collective judgment of a group of researchers. As such, it is considered the weakest form of validity. With face validity, a measure looks like it measures what we hope to measure, but it has not been proven to do so. Two is content validity, which is frequently considered equivalent to face validity, but it measures more. Content or logical validity is the extent to which experts agree that the measure should cover all aspects or dimensions of a construct. If we're constructing a test of arithmetic and we only focus on addition skills, we would clearly lack content validity as we have ignored subtraction, multiplication, and division. While face validity and content validity are distinct, they can be related. A test with high content validity is likely to also have face validity because if a test comprehensively covers a construct, it is more likely to appear to measure what it is supposed to measure. Here's an example. Imagine developing a survey to measure police officers' stress levels, while face validity can be when the survey might be viewed by a few officers who determine that questions like "I feel overwhelmed at work" and "I find it difficult to relax after a shift" seem to measure stress. Content validity, on the other hand, is when experts in psychology and law enforcement would review the survey to ensure it includes questions covering all relevant aspects of stress, such as workload, exposure to traumatic events, and support systems to ensure comprehensive coverage and not just the two questions created for measuring face validity. The third one is construct validity, which is the degree to which a test or measurement tool accurately measures the theoretical construct or concept it purports to represent or measure. It involves an understanding of the theoretical foundations of the construct. A measure has construct validity when it conforms or reflects the underlying construct and not something else. There's also criterion validity, convergent validity, and discriminant validity. Reliability. Reliability refers to the question of whether we can trust the answers that people give us, even when their misstatements are honest ones. For example, we would expect that the question, "Did you see a police officer in your neighborhood today?" would have higher reliability than the question about "How many times in the past 6 months have you seen a police officer in your neighborhood?" The difference between validity and reliability can be demonstrated using a bathroom scale as an example. If you step on the scale repeatedly and it gives you a different weight each time, the scale has a reliability problem. However, if the scale shows that you weigh 160 pounds every time you step on it when you actually are 185 pounds, the scale is reliable, but it has a validity problem. There are ways to deal with issues related to reliability of research. One of them is when you make the same measurement more than once, you should expect the same response each time. Also, you can make more than one measure of any concept and see if each measures the concept differently. Sometimes creating specific, reliable measurements reduces the depth of meaning of concepts. To address this, we use multiple or composite measures that combine two or more variables. By doing this, we can achieve more accurate and reliable indicators, especially in criminal justice research, which often deals with attitudes and opinions in surveys. Chapter 6, Measuring Crime, explains the principal measures of crime as a fundamental concept in criminal justice research. We'll discuss briefly only some of the major topics here. The textbook covers all aspects of measuring crime, so you're encouraged to study it. Crime can be a dependent or an independent variable, or it can be both, such as drug use and other offenses. Researchers must decide on what offenses constitute crime. Are they acts of force or fraud, or acts committed in violation of a law? Different measures tend to focus on different types of crime. As we've covered before, units of analysis are the specific entities that are being studied or analyzed in a research project. Crime generally involves offenders, offenses, incidents, and victims as unit of analysis researchers collect information about. The purposes for which we measure crime vary, but generally we do it for monitoring, for agency accountability, and for criminal justice research. Police-based crime measures are the most widely used. Police come to know about crime in two ways: through observations such as victimless crime and traffic offenses, and through reports by others, like victims or witnesses. Police do not always make official records of crimes they observe or crimes reported to them. Uniform Crime Reports. FBI compiles its UCR figures from data submitted by individual states or local law enforcement agencies. These are data series collected since 1930. UCR does not attempt to count all crimes reported to police. There are two parts of offenses or index crimes measured by UCR. Part 1 offenses are considered the most serious and include 8 crimes. Part 2 offenses are less serious and are counted only if a person is arrested and charged with a crime, which may differ by states. There are problems with UCR such as quality of data, clerical and data processing, and the hierarchy rule, where if multiple crimes are committed in a single incident, only the most serious is counted in the UCR. In addition to UCR, we have two series of crime measures that are based on incidents as units of analysis, sponsored by the U.S. Justice Department. These are National Incident-Based Reporting System, NIBRS, and Supplementary Homicide Reports, SHR. The main difference between NIBRS and UCR system is that NIBRS reports each crime incident rather than a summary of certain crimes for each law enforcement agency. It includes much more detailed information about individual incidents together with the offenses, offenders, and victims within each incident. It also gathers 46 offenses compared to UCR's 8. Victim surveys are alternative measures of crime. A survey involves presenting a sample of people with carefully worded questions and recording their responses. Measuring crime through surveys is still subject to error, but it has several advantages, like obtaining information not reported or recorded as crimes by police, and providing data on individuals, victims and offenders, and on the social artifacts, incidents themselves. One of the most important surveys is the National Crime Victimization Survey, NCVS, which started in 1972 by the U.S. Census Bureau. This was based on a nationally representative sample of households asked to record victimization within the past 6 months. This survey cannot measure all crime. Potential problems could be people not remembering incidents and underestimating crimes in which the victim and offender know each other. Then we have the Community Victimization Surveys, which are a joint effort by the Bureau of Justice Statistics and the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, COPS. They are tools used to collect data on the prevalence and types of victimization experienced by individuals within a community. These surveys typically ask respondents about their experiences with crime, including whether they have been victims of certain offenses, such as assault, theft, burglary, or vandalism. The goal is to gather information directly from the public to understand better the scope and nature of crime in a specific area. Self-report surveys were developed to measure crimes with unclear victims that are less often detected by police, such as prostitution, drug abuse, public order crimes, etc. There are two ongoing self-report studies that estimate drug use among high school seniors and adults. One is NSDUH, which asks a national sample of households questions about the use of illegal drugs, alcohol, and tobacco. The other is Monitoring the Future, that includes high school seniors with over 46,000 respondents in 2011. Each measure of crime has strengths and weaknesses. UCR and supplementary homicide reports are best for murder and crimes in which the victim is a business or commercial establishment. NCVS is best for crimes against persons or households that are not reported to police. Self-report surveys are best at measuring crimes that do not have readily identifiable victims and that are less often observed by or reported to police. In the end, there are a few videos in Week 3 Lessons folder that you must watch to learn more about crime and statistical measurements. For this week, make sure to complete Week 3 exam and the discussion board on Brightspace by the end of the week. Before you attempt to engage in the discussion post, make sure to read chapters 5 and 6 to gain the necessary knowledge to ace your assignments. Also read chapters 2, 4, and 6 in the Pre-Shock book. Have a great week, everyone. Looking forward to seeing you in the forums.